The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Welcome in, everybody. It's a brand new week, Monday morning. Let's get rolling on another edition of Need to Know. Kip Keefer on TKR, and we are back to talk about everything happening. And unfortunately, we've only got about a 30 or 35-minute scheduled podcast today and every day. Although if I ramble and get out of control, the proprietor of this fine establishment, the Tony Kurre Radio Network, Tony Kurre himself, allows me to go on for 45 or 50 minutes in certain situations. We'll try to keep it within the time parameters today. I want to talk about our former president today, Barack Obama, who has been in the headlines all week, and none of the aspects of his presence particularly good. We'll talk about that here as we kick off things. I wanted to tell you that it's very interesting in Washington. There's aspects to this story involving the former president that seem really juicy, and some really overzealous folks are saying, well, this could turn out to be another Watergate. The implications are so impressive here. But the problem is, in Washington, the news media goes hook, line, and sinker for a lot of these stories. From the right's perspective, okay, we've got Obama now pinned in the corner. They're going to throw the book at him. He may be indicted. He may be in trouble. He may be facing serious charges. Okay, that's good to froth at the mouth over and think about. On the other hand, the left media is saying, why are they just recounting incidents that happened so long ago, almost 10 years ago now? You know, they're stuck in the past. We need to move on and talk about what's happening right now. I heard Amy Klobuchar, the absolutely horrid senator from Minnesota, the People's Republic of Minnesota, with their fabulous governor, Walz, failed vice presidential candidate, macho man, former football coach. Actually, he was a social studies teacher who put on a whistle and stood around at practice like just about every high school program has to fill out a staff of some measure. Remember when Walz was running for vice president? One of the early comments from the Harris campaign was, he's a lot like the coach that was in Friday Night Lights. Well, there was one big difference. The coach in Friday Night Lights was the head coach and one of the seminal characters. In his coaching career, Coach Walz was just called a linebacker coach. We had 4 or 5 of those guys on our staff when I played high school football way back when. And a lot of the guys really didn't know anything about football. They were making an extra $75 a week by sticking around after school and going to practice and help get things organized, maybe carry a few buckets out there or some yard markers. To suggest that this guy was a football coach was absolutely ridiculous. Okay, he was on the staff and there was a state championship won, but to say that Coach Walz won a state championship in his high school coaching career was the biggest stretch of facts ever. This guy was a glorified assistant in the sense of not so much even being an assistant coach. I'm really off the rails here. What I wanted to talk about, but I just was trying to emphasize that the left has the opinion of Amy Klobuchar that we need to stick to current issues, and this mess that this administration, all this crap they're doing that has made our nation chaotic. I mean, only a leftist, completely partisan, I'm just going to say it, corrupt idiot dumbass can look at the last 6 months and the unbelievable progress from where this country was in the absent administration of the previous 4 years and where they are and where we are today. It's night and day. It's completely different. And, again, the perspective on all of this is amazing. One of the big things that hit in the last couple of days is the unexplained passing at the Obama beachfront compound, the passing of their personal chef who worked at the White House and then went to work for the Obamas at Martha's Vineyard. He drowned in a terrible accident. I guess it was about last spring. It's been more than a year ago, I believe. But the circumstances around his death were very suspicious. There was no real accounting for his movements that day. They've really released very little information. He just basically turned up dead in between, meal preparation shifts while I don't know what he was doing on the ocean, maybe on I don't think he was surfing, but rafting, or I don't really remember the circumstances, but that story's come back around today because the investigation, I guess, is still open. And now and you don't know if any of these sources are credible, and I'm not lending any credence to this story at all, but it was just the last thing Obama needed to hear when it came out this week that there's Tulsi Gabbard, the director of intelligence, has come up with a bunch of emails and documents from the previous administration, James Clapper in her job during the Obama administration. And it all talks about all of the things they were pulling in 2016 to try and create this Russiagate controversy that Donald Trump somehow was aided in beating Hillary Clinton in the election due to Russian meddling and interference, and he colluded with the Russians, even was suggested he was a Russian agent. And Barack Obama was presiding over all of that and encouraging all of his operatives to create this narrative before the election to try to ensure Hillary Clinton's success, and especially after the election when he beat her and they were trying to totally discredit him and maybe even derail him from day one in his administration. So that came out this week. Obama also went on his wife Michelle's podcast, and really, I'm just, and I have respect for presidents. I don't really have much disdain or dislike for Barack Obama. I think Barack Obama is way off on his opinion of modern day geopolitics and America in general. The Obamas have a big chip on their shoulder for whatever reason, as they're living lavishly and luxuriously in one of the premier locations in the world. But there's just this lingering bitterness that everything they tried to build. Remember when Barack Obama became president, the oceans are going to rise, the skies are going to explode. It's going to be this glorious transformation of America. That was the vision. It was to take America from the country it was founded to be, make it a global citizen, kumbaya with the rest of the world. He started off his term doing an apology tour, going all over the world, apologizing to governments for America being such a bully and being such a force in world affairs, being, forcing themselves. Of course, he doesn't mention that twice we sent our most treasured possession our young men to Europe to liberate the continent not once, but twice, and defeat the most evil regime in the history of the world with the Normandy invasion and D-Day and the involvement in World War I when the German armies were on the verge of seizing control of Europe. We have bailed them out twice, not to mention all of the things that America has stood for in terms of being the stabilizing force in the world since its founding in the late 1700s. But all that, now Barack Obama, who is in a tough position. We saw Bill Clinton go through this after his term in the 90s. Other ones, George W. Bush comes to mind, who was still relatively a young man when his presidency wrapped up. What do you do to follow up being president of the United States, the commander-in-chief, the most recognizable, powerful man in the free world? What do you do for an encore? Barack Obama had a good idea for an encore, as he basically had his third term in office as being the shadow government, while Joe Biden occupied the title, but certainly was not mentally present to actually run the country or take care of all of the things that are involved. And it's a 24/7, 365 endeavor. Look at presidents going into office and look how they are coming out. They look like they've aged 20 years a lot of times. I saw Obama on what I was speaking of, the podcast with his wife last week, and Barack Obama looks nothing like he did when he was president up until 2016. I mean, he looks really old. He's in the last 9 years, he has really taken some steps in that direction. But on that podcast, he was talking about how Democrats have lost young men because they're just not sending them the right messages, and all this crap about, young men need to get more perspective and not listen to the wrong influencers. And he suggested they take the route that he was able to take by seeking out people with different views of him, talking about all of the gay friends that he had when he was a young man. And some of his main mentors had different ideas about America and government and sexuality and the role of young men. He was saying all the things, and as he continued to dig the hole deeper and deeper in trying to make sense and supposedly reaching out to young listeners, which I don't think anybody is listening in the youthful camp, the 18 to 30 camp, to the Michelle Obama podcast. I can't imagine anything she would have to say that would be of any interest to any young man in this country. Yes, young men have abandoned the Democrat Party. They've abandoned because they've been their masculinity has been challenged. It's been called toxic. Young men have been under siege, and all of there's just so many reasons why young men do not identify with this party, who's trying to homogenize genders and make all of us tie for first place, put some men in women's sports. The whole implication is that being male and being masculine is somehow some kind of social disease, and you need to acclimate and be more like everybody else and not be a young man per se. He really did not do a good job on that podcast of making his point. The bottom line is, with the information coming out now about the chef, supposedly, and again, I don't know if the source is credible, but supposedly one of the motivations for staying with the Obamas was profit. because this was a guy who, just like so many staffers on the Biden administration, so many people that Donald Trump jettisoned in his first term, all of them want to write the tell-all book and make the big score and be on easy street financially. And supposedly this guy was pretty far along in compiling notes and already talking to publishers behind the scenes about a tell-all book about the Obamas. He'd witnessed them for 8 years in the White House, was right there for a lot of conversations and different things, and was privy to a lot of information from staffers. And also continuing with them and for a year or two in Hyannis, or actually in Martha's Vineyard. But mysteriously, he had this untimely demise. And if you really kind of trace back, there has been a lot of this going on. The Clintons are famous. There are people keeping a scoreboard. I think it's up to like 38 people died mysterious deaths that were never explained, never investigated thoroughly, apparently, where there's just some forces behind the scenes that sort of keep all of this sort of, and I said sort of twice, sound like I'm really engaged in a casual conversation here. But what it boils down to is all of these things kind of get swept under the rug and they're forgotten about under the auspices of, well, that's yesterday's news. That was a year ago. That was 5 years ago. That was 10 years ago. And it all is part of the frustration that so many of us have when Donald Trump last week, and again, Donald Trump has done more in 6 months to completely bring this country back from the absolute brink of catastrophe to a place where we are actually operating at a high level economically. Our land is being secured. The border is completely cured. Democrats lied to you for 4 years. Well, they're pouring across the border, but if Congress doesn't act, there's nothing we can do. Well, Donald Trump didn't wait for Congress. He immediately imposed policies that shut the border down cold, where thousands of people a day were coming in at this time last year. Now, no one, zero, zippo, nada coming across that border. Amazing that so many people have been deported from the country that are serious criminals, because with these sanctuary cities, murderers, rapists, child molesters, child pornography purveyors, armed robbers, people that have been accused and convicted of assault have just been let out with no bail, just a turnstile policy of justice that has been catastrophic. We had 3 incidents over the weekend of violence by illegal invaders that have all been jailed and charged numerous times, but somehow, some way, still find themselves out on the street. That is all underway now in big time fashion. Almost 2,500 in just 6 months have been deported, and that continues. We need to get them out of the country. Now, it's important to point out that Barack Obama has also been a major critic, like all Democrats, of the just terroristic tactics that the Trump administration is using on our citizens, tearing communities and families apart with Gestapo-like Nazi activity to expel these people from the country, do these arrests and sweeps and get them out of here. Barack Obama fails to mention that in the first year of his second term in 2013, Barack Obama set an all-time record for deportations of 4,700 people in a single year. Trump is about halfway to that mark now, but Trump has come in after the border was open for 4 years under the who knows who administration. I call it Barack Obama 3, because he was the wizard behind the curtain, pulling the levers and pulleys and manipulating events. But the situation was completely different. And so many of these people came to this country with criminal convictions and having their past stained with activity. Venezuela literally emptied their prisons and sent every single major offender to this country. And that's why we had such a spike in crime, gang activities, murders, heinous crimes. So Trump has a completely different situation, but Obama, in a time where supposedly there was border scrutiny and control, was deporting people in the country illegally. And you can't escape videotape. You cannot escape comments you made because it's all there, documented. Barack Obama said, "We have got so many people in this country that we've got to get out of here. They don't belong. They came in illegally. And just by their presence here, not being documented properly, they are criminals." He said it. It's on tape. You can find it with one simple Google search. That was the policy of the Obama administration in his second term. He was deporting everybody that they could find, and ICE's activities were exactly tactically what we're seeing today. ICE was rounding up these people and shipping them the hell out of here because they were here illegally. And if you don't agree with that, read the Constitution. It is very clear. Anyone who has not entered a proper immigration process, and immigration, as I say every time we talk about this, there's no such thing as illegal immigrants, because immigration is defined by being a legal process. So if you are a migrant in this country and you're not here legally, according to the Constitution and the laws of the land, you are a criminal. And that is not the focus of this first sweep, although a lot of them are ending up kind of in the net, so to speak. But I don't have sympathy. They are not legally residents of this country. They're not citizens. And to say that our people are being rounded up and our communities are being disrupted is really saying, okay, we're a land of illegal invaders, but we are not a land of law and order, because their presence here violates the law, particularly when so many of these people are serious, convicted, violent offenders, many of killing other people. It doesn't make you safe or me safe walking the streets when you've got a criminal element that was allowed to come into this country for nefarious political reasons that we don't have time to discuss today. But basically, that's kind of the rundown. I mentioned the chef who was supposedly negotiating for a tell-all book, suddenly meeting his demise on the beach right outside the Obama compound. Very mysterious circumstances. And, you know, it reminded me, remember and I consider it the greatest movie ever made. And it was really a two-part, because The Godfather and then Godfather 2, which was kind of a prequel and bringing it up to modern times. But that combination, which I kind of consider one movie, the greatest in achievement, Francis Ford Coppola and The Godfather, just amazing. There's a really interesting scene in that movie that comes to mind when I think about all of these mysterious people that maybe were going to be a major problem for the Obamas and the Clintons and political opponents. I think about the scene in the movie where Michael Corleone comes back after being in Sicily for a couple of years following his elimination of Sollozzo, the drug dealer who had tried to assassinate his father. he comes back and seeks out Diane Keaton, who's the character, of course, that was playing Kay, his love interest before all that blew up and he had to flee the country. And he finds her. She's teaching a bunch of school children, and they're, I don't know, like a walk or a field trip. Remember, he sidles up in his limousine and gets out and walks with her and is trying to he's telling her he's back. He's been back for a year, but he's been trying to get his affairs in order. Hadn't seen her in like 3 years after they'd been engaged. She tells him, of course, how that he had just devastated her and hurt her and not stayed in touch. He tried to explain the circumstances. Anyway, the long and short of the story, the point of this is when he says, okay, we're going to go completely legitimate with the family business. My father is no different than any powerful man, presidents, senators. He just does what he has to do. And Kay looks at him and says, Michael, you're so naive. Presidents and senators don't have men killed. And Michael looks at her and says, who's being naive now, Kay? And it's really one of those scenes that resonates with me because anyone who knows history, anyone who looks at world leaders, you can look no further than Vladimir Putin, of course, which that won't surprise anybody. All of the most vile, horrible leaders from the previous century, Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, even Vladimir Lenin at the beginning of the Russian Revolution. It was characterized by the shameful murders of political opponents and people that were in their way. It's been the case, even Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist who had kind of gone against the royal family, met his end, and there's no question that operatives in the Saudi government took him out. This has been going on since the beginning of time. You can go back to and find plots against the leader, and the conspirators are just eliminated. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that there could be some serious fire where this smoke is. But like everything else, the reason that it continues to happen is because no one's ever held accountable. Nobody ever follows through. Recently, we had the whole controversy with Donald Trump, and it's probably one of the only warts on his administration so far, coming in, pledging absolute transparency. Everything's going to be released to the American public. There's going to be no more secrets in the government. Well, so far, that's off to a really lousy start because Pam Bondi, who is now the Attorney General, is waffling on releasing a lot of that kind of information, and most recently balking at the idea that the Jeffrey Epstein files and all of the investigation information was going to be released. Trump got surly after the question was asked, and we talked about this briefly last week of, why do you want to talk about him? He's a creep. He's gone. We got so much good stuff going on. We don't need to talk about him. And I emphasized last week, I do not agree with that. Jeffrey Epstein lived in a situation where he was doing nefarious things with underage women and also facilitating that activity for many other powerful people. And those people should be accountable for their actions. But that's yesterday's news and we've moved on and who cares and whatever. That's always the mantra, and nothing ever happens. There's never repercussions on these kind of issues. The problem with that is the way he lived and who he was subservient to and who was taking advantage of what he was doing, and the way he died, to tie it into this discussion, because there's nobody with a functioning brain that can't see that every explanation of his death in a jail cell in a federal facility is absolute BS. It's so ridiculous. You cannot even find a way to come around to think it was possible that he actually committed suicide. Everything adds up to the fact that he was taken out because he was a threat to people that didn't want to be exposed, and these powerful forces that still, no matter what the administration is, a strong man like Donald Trump, who's executing his agenda by the letter and has already achieved amazing things, it just doesn't seem to matter, because whatever that dark force in the shadows is, they seem to manipulate a lot of events no matter who's in charge, which kind of undermines the whole reason for the way our country is supposed to work. So Epstein's elimination and the lame explanation that, oh, well, the security guards, there were only two of them that night. They were really understaffed. One of them was even an office worker who volunteered to work some overtime. They both fell asleep at the same time. Nobody was making rounds. Oh, and all the cameras in that hallway were inoperable during that night for some reason. Oh, and yes, the cellmate for Epstein was removed the day before. And just a couple days before that, he was issued linens for his cell again, after they were denied at first because someone suggested he was on suicide watch. Epstein's lawyers say, in a meeting the day before the alleged suicide, he was optimistic. They were talking about his appeal. They were talking about his trial and a lot of technicalities that he was feeling good about possibly getting a lighter sentence and basically escaping some of the more serious charges. So it just doesn't add up. A lot of these people just disappear, get eliminated, and then there's some buzz about it, but the news cycle changes and we forget all the circumstances involved. The Department of Justice has suggested, after Tulsi Gabbard released a lot of information this weekend about emergency meetings in the Oval Office, Barack Obama summoning James Comey, the then FBI director, James Clapper, the head of the Department of National Intelligence, and John Brennan, who at the time was his CIA director. They cooked up a complete report based on just not fact, not properly interpreted information, but it was completely conceived that Donald Trump colluded with the Russians to win the 2016 election over Hillary Clinton. First of all, when that story first started to bubble up, I was doing a show here in Birmingham called The Ride Home with the brilliant partner I continue to have on the sports side, Terry Quillian, and within 48 hours of looking into this, we declared it what it turned out to be, an absolute hoax fraud. It made no sense then. Why would Vladimir Putin manipulate the American election in favor of Donald Trump, who was going to come in and be no nonsense? And he came in and slammed Russia with tons of sanctions, cut off basically their ability to sell oil to the rest of the world. He was a giant pain in Putin's rear end. And Hillary Clinton had been playing the footsie game with international foes for years. It made no sense. Why would Putin want Trump to be president? That was absurd, and nobody ever asked that question. Why would there be collusion there? And the suggestion that Donald Trump was a Russian agent, the world's ultimate capitalist, was a communist agent, that was just asinine. It was not true. And Peter Strzok, remember the Strzok and Page FBI lovers who exchanged thousands of texts over a 2-year period on the public airwaves of the U.S. government. There was one time in there where Strzok was telling Page that he had been investigating Trump. This was before the election, that they had this BS Steele dossier that was supposedly was given to them by a British Secret Service agent, which was outlining Trump's ties to the Soviets and the Russians. And Peter Strzok told Page in a text, I've been looking into this for a couple of months. I have found not one shred of evidence that Trump was even ever in contact with anybody in Russia. We can't find any link between Trump and Russia. He was already admitting at that point, as the lead investigator for the FBI put on this deal by James Comey, that there was nothing there. It was absolute fraud. And yet, 4 times after the original FISA warrant that went to the special court that decided if American citizens could be spied upon, 4 more times after the original document, a renewal document was sent to FISA courts to continue to investigate Donald Trump, even after he had taken office, where it was clear there was absolutely no collusion whatsoever. But the last act of the Barack Obama administration was to instruct Brennan and Clapper and Comey to write that document, keep this alive, leak parts of it to the press periodically, keep the story bubbling, and maybe, just maybe, they'll find some dirt on Trump by getting this permission from the special court that allowed them to spy on the president-elect and then later the president himself. This is far worse corruption than Watergate. But as I tell you all that, I also have to tell you nothing is going to come from this. There will be no repercussions. The excuse was that was 10 years ago. Who cares? Is going to be played. That card's going to be played repeatedly. And although there are many that need to be implicated in this situation, nobody ever will, because Washington is completely protected, insulated from any attack on the overall organism, and everybody is complicit in that. And for whatever reason, whatever pulls the strings, whatever behind the scenes dictates the course of events, that's just the sad reality of our representative republic now. We'll never have total transparency because there will be no stomach or initiative to really upset the organism that is your federal government. It's the greatest growth industry in the history of the world, and it protects itself at all costs. So, you know, who's being naive now? The news media, for one, who is reporting on this story like it really has a lot of potential to be something serious. But I'll tell you who's being naive. It's the American people. If any of us believe that despite all of this smoke, as I mentioned, that any fire is going to be detected, much less ever put out. I'm Kip Keefer. That's what you need to know on this Monday. We'll be back next week with more on TKR.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.